So we've talked about some skills, we've talked about some technique strategies. Let's ground them in some real life examples and stories. Now, I know you probably have a lot of stories and a lot of experiences. So I want to focus on any situation you've been in where there was some kind of conflict between different ideological groups, maybe a protest, counter protest situation, groups
Mhm.
of different sides potentially escalating to something not good, where there was some kind of political interest or motivation at play in the conflict. And go ahead and set the stage for us,
Okay.
what the environment was like, what the vibe was like, the groups that were there, who else you were with from MPT, and some stories about how you successfully de-escalated something.
All right. Well, the first one that comes to mind is there was a big protest at the Capitol um, that was hosted by Moms Against Gun Violence. And we had been invited to place a peace team there because, sad it is to report, you may know that Michigan also has a large militia population who were furious that their Second Amendment rights might be coming into question, and that they may lose some some portion of what they feel is their rights to their weapons. And it was a large gathering at the Capitol, and we had a number of peace teams. And when we're doing a large peace team, we break down into subset groups called affinity teams, so that we can cover more ground, and we can communicate with each other. We have walkie talkies so that if there's a hot spot that flares up, we can move over. So there was a group, there was a lot of militia and extreme Second Amendment enthusiasts, shall we say. Um, and they were armed to the teeth. I mean, in a way, it was almost comical because, like, I didn't know bandoleros were a real thing, like those swaths of bullets that you can wear across your chest like a sash. They had those on, and they had their automatic rifles, and they also had a handgun on their thigh, and um they had babies in carriages that that were holding signs that said, "My mom's a proud gun owner," and the mom standing there with her gun. They were really waiting. They were waiting for an excuse to 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 come forward. You could see they were kind of simmering because, in part, I think there was such a large turnout of people in support of gun control legislation, which of course I would think, make them feel more threatened. So when we go into a setting, we are pleasant to everybody. We do not take sides on who we are going to protect from violence and who we are not going to protect, where everyone is to be protected, whether they're the perpetrator or the target. We walk around and say hello to people. So we were walking, my little affinity team were walking past, I guess you would call them a pod, like one of the groups that were there. They were standing in groups of these very enthusiastic gun enthusiasts. I guess that's from the Department of Redundancy department. But anyway, we said hi, just like we would say hi to the moms who were carrying signs, for gun control, good morning, how are you? Good to see you, nice day, kind of thing. One of the guys that had his automatic weapon across his chest in front of his sash of bullets said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, we're just, we were invited by the organizers, make sure everything stays safe." And he says, "Anybody bothers me, I've got this." And he slaps his weapon. And I said, so I really touched him very gently, which wasn't intuitive as opposed to strategic. I probably shouldn't have done that. But, and I said, "And that's why we're here. So nobody bothers you and you're safe." And it totally, like, you almost saw him physically recoil, that it was not what he expected. It took wind out of his sails. He was waiting for a spark, something to initiate that we're going to go get them kind of thing. We're going to fight for our rights kind of thing. And no one's going to stand between us and them. It never occurred to him, I don't think, until that point, that we would stand between them and um, anybody bothering him as well. Like, we don't want anyone hurt. We're not taking a side here. You could see, like, after our team went by a little bit, the whole, we do this whole thing on body language, but their body language relaxed, and they suddenly looked like observers as opposed to potential threats. The reason why it stands out for me, even though there was not a lot of, obviously there was no overt violence in that, was so much of what we do is to get there before the violence happens, so that we can like de-escalate something before it ramps up. We don't wait until people are really ticked off, and like we try and like set the tone so that it doesn't seem like a place where violence would fit. And a lot of times we'll see people who are there to yell things out or scream things or interrupt things. They lose their enthusiasm for it when they're treated humanely. Not welcoming their overt violence, not making them feel like, oh, we're so glad to see you necessarily, but that whole Barbara Deming thing of like, the two hands of nonviolence that she talks about. All right, so Barbara Deming has this thing where the first hand is, and you can't see, like a stop sign kind of hand. Stop. I will not let you hurt another human being. I will not participate in this violence. I will impede your ability to hurt others or yourself. And then, but the other hand is reaching out. But I see you as a fellow human being, and I want us to be part of the same community. So I will stop the violence, but I will not hate you. Holding that tension consistently, I think really helps de-escalate things. One of the other things that comes to mind, again, we got there before it could have gotten a lot worse. We were at a Pride event, a statewide Pride event in Michigan. And huge, there's always a big parade. There's a commitment ceremony on the steps of the Capitol. There is festival grounds with like beer tents and vendors, stuff like that. It's a really big deal. This was we always have different groups of affinity teams scattered. So some are at the beginning of the parade, some are at the end of the parade, some are at the Capitol, some are at the festival grounds. I was with an affinity team. We were at the Capitol. Now, we never demonize the police. We never make them the enemy, but we never partner with them either. And we never feed them information. At first, they hated seeing us because they would say, we're going to get in the way. We don't know what we're doing. We're going to cause more trouble. Well, now, after so many years, the shift has been like, have you let Peace Team know what's happening? So because they know that we do good work, but part of that came from this event. So there was a man coming down the street, and he had obviously been visiting the beer tent earlier in the day, I guess. And he was completely heartbroken. He was trying his best not to cry. It turned out, we found out later, that he had a son that was gay, and his son had just recently passed away from AIDS or something following AIDS. And he was heartbroken because he had never reconciled with his son. He'd never told his son that he loved him after coming out. He had never told him that he was proud of him. And this was his first venture where he was publicly saying, I loved my son. And I'm here to show that I loved my son. Whether he was gay or straight does not matter. But he had been drinking and he was heartbroken. And so he was a little uninhibited. One of the other groups of people that's frequently at these events is a bunch of people who identify themselves as ministers or pastors, and they're standing on the corner and they're yelling into the crowd about, you guys don't know anything about love. It's all bestiality. You're going to burn in hell. Your parents are I mean, all kinds of horrible things. So it just so happened during the parade that this father's coming up the street. He was upset. And then the pastor started yelling about like, I think he had a shirt or something on. I'm trying to remember how they knew something about his son. Maybe he had said something aloud, but they knew that he was there for his son who had passed away. And they were yelling at him about his son is burning in hell. So he starts going over there and he's gonna rip them apart. And of course, these people who identify as ministers are just as happy to rip him back apart. I saw a young police officer heading over there, and he had his hand in his baton. He was going to break it up because it was going to be a fight, and he was going to stop it. And his sergeant stopped him and said, "Peace team will handle it." At that exact moment, one of our peace team members went over to the father and said, "You just lost your son? Oh my God, can you tell me about him? What was he like?" At the same time, another one of our peace team members said to these group of ministers, "Hold on, hold on, hold on. You guys keep talking about it. It's in the Bible, but I can't find it. You have your Bibles right there. Where is it? Show me where it is." So while they're all showing one peace team member where it is in the Bible, they feel that, people who are LGBTQ plus are burning in hell. The father's being escorted away, being able to talk about his son. No fight, no big brawl, and no violence from the police officer who had his hand on the baton. So it's things like that that constantly happen. Those little things that stop the violence before it happens, which is why it's not in the news, which is why you don't read about the peace teams being helpful in the field, because unless you're standing in front of somebody just before they fire a gun, it's not newsworthy.